Okay, we are live.
I think I hear the sounds of them and people talking. The months have passed without much movement. Our voices sound distorted on speakerphone. No certain texture, no certain smell. I lie in dread of a familiar tale, a prison island, a golden cage. We're left alone in silent heartache. No certain texture, no certain smell. Bring home the desperate souls. Bring home the ones we love.
Welcome everyone to the Reconnect Australia virtual vigil. It will be live streamed today on YouTube with a live chat. The recording will also be available on the Reconnect Australia YouTube channel. The purpose of today's event is to mark and to mourn the 18 months of lost time, missed opportunities, and milestones spent apart for people who have been impacted by Australia's border restrictions. An enormous number of people have experienced significant loss, hardship, and heartbreak as a result of the Australian government's COVID-19 border restrictions. Today, we're going to acknowledge these people and hear their stories. The Reconnect Australia group formed a few months ago when the news of the reduction in caps, the travel caps, was first announced. The stress, the emotion, and the grief was really palpable in the social media support groups that have all formed over the last 18 months as a result of this situation. So a few of us started to connect through these groups. We're mostly Australian expatriates or migrants who are from Australia, located in the US, the EU, and UK. But our numbers have grown to also include supporters and members from people who are in Australia or people who are otherwise affected by the border closures. Our motivation is to speak up, because what is happening right now to people as a result of Australia's border policies and management is not okay. The people affected are not okay, and there's no end in sight. We first started with the Get Counted campaign, which launched about 6 weeks ago. This is an effort to count the number of people affected. We hear a lot in the media the figure of 38,000, the number of people who are on DFAT's list to be repatriated. But we believe this is the tip of the iceberg. This number, the 38,000, only represents the most vulnerable and desperate to travel. And only a small number of people who are vulnerable and desperate to travel are actually eligible for those flights and to register with DFAT. So first of all, for those of you who are listening, if you are a person affected, please check the links below and you can make sure you get counted too. The very act of launching the Get Counted campaign showed us how many more people were affected than we realized. We started off knowing about 3 or 4 Facebook support groups. The list we have now includes groups that number almost 90, and every single day we find out about new groups. Some of these groups have tens of thousands of members. So that's why today we're bringing everyone together for the virtual vigil. It'll give everyone a chance to hear from representatives in many of those affected groups, so they can tell you their stories about how Australia's border restrictions are causing these high levels of stress and grief and trauma. After this live event, an in-person vigil will happen at Australia House in London. People are starting to gather there now. People will come together on the ground and mourn the last 18 months. I'll hand you over now to Nicola, who will introduce our first speakers.
Hi everyone, thank you.
First, we'll be hearing from speakers representing partners that have been separated. These people represent couples who have found themselves on opposite sides of the Australian border restrictions since March 2020. This situation happens because the person in Australia cannot leave the country, either due to an inability to meet the criteria for exiting, or because their request to exit was denied, or because the person outside Australia cannot enter because of their nationality or visa status. Many of these partners have not seen or touched their significant other since the pandemic began. Our speakers will talk us through the exemption process that the Morrison government has put in place, the challenges with this process, and the experience of being apart from your other half during a global pandemic.
G'day everybody, my name's Adam Burns and I'm an immigration lawyer at Visa and Citizenship Lawyers. I'm also an admin of the Facebook group Partners Apart. Now, as it sounds, Partners Apart is a Facebook group for partners who are separated at this time during these COVID travel restrictions. I personally am impacted by these travel restrictions, and my partner of 8 years is overseas in Ukraine, and I haven't seen her at all during this time of COVID restrictions. So I'm personally impacted by this. I'm personally helping many people reunite, but my particular circumstances don't fit into the category, or one of the categories, any of the categories that are available for people at this time for partners to reunite. Now, the other partners in the group are people who are Australian citizens, separated from their temporary visa holding partners or wannabe temporary visa holding partners overseas, or we've got people who are both temporary visa holders in relationships where they're separated at this time. So a person may be in Australia on a temporary visa, working, contributing to Australian society, and their partner isn't able to come and join them. So that's the kind of people we have in our group, and we're trying to reunite people in Australia. They want to come to Australia. Alrighty, so one of the issues with this, there is a couple of travel exemption categories which are applicable to partners who are apart. One of them is the immediate family member category, immediate family member of an Australian citizen or permanent resident. One of the issues with this category is that there's a definition of what immediate family member means on the Department of Home Affairs website. And what we're seeing is people who clearly meet the definition. That is that the definition is you're married or in a de facto relationship. De facto relationship has been defined as you've lived together for at least 12 months or you have registered your relationship. So we're seeing people who have registered their relationship or who are married being refused travel exemptions to enter Australia at this time. Crazy stuff, since that they clearly meet the definition on the Department of Home Affairs website. So what we see is it takes more than just the certificate of marriage or certificate of registered relationship. It takes what's called the 4 pillars: financial, household, social, and level of commitment. And that's where a lot of people are really struggling at this point in time to produce evidence of financial or household evidence when they're separated during this time of COVID. So if you haven't seen your partner for 1.5 years or however long it's been since you've seen your partner, there's not much household evidence you can supply, all right, or social. There's not many pictures that you've been together recently. So this is where a lot of people are falling down, I believe, in my perspective, in the assessment of the immediate family member category. Alrighty, so then there are other people that decide a consequence of what's going on right now. So sometimes people apply. They cannot get into Australia. They're separated, right? So sometimes the person in Australia, the partner in Australia, decides to leave Australia to reunite with their relationship. Sometimes they leave their job, their employment, they leave their accommodation, their renting, or whatever it is, and then they spend time with their partner because that's really important to them. They build evidence of relationship overseas, and then they may apply for an exemption to come to Australia, or they apply for an offshore partner visa. So these are the kinds of things people are doing at this time to reunite. Now, what is my solution or suggestion at this time to reunite partners? Well, I think there's only one. I think there is only one suggestion or solution that I have to offer at this point in time, and that is the only difference I can see to the current scenario is to lift the flight restrictions or the amount of people entering Australia, because until they do so, I just can't see how that temporary visa holders are going to be granted exemptions to enter Australia. Why would they be when Australians can't get home? So my only suggestion or solution is to lift the flight caps, let more people back into Australia, then perhaps we'll see more travel exemption grants.
Hi everyone, my name is Luisa Gonzalez and I am the manager of loveisnottourism Australia. And I have been separated from my fiance for 18 months. I read the similar stories in the group every day. We work together as a couple and we work together online, and that is an advantage, but that doesn't mean anything because we cannot be together as many other couples and families, right? Every day since the past 18 months since this started, I read terrible stories all the time. Families and partners are apart, and this happened in many places, and a lot of people is just trying every day to have a travel exemption, and they are trying to show all that they have to be accepted to have a travel exemption, and it's not happening for many couples around the world. And I see in the group people dealing with anxiety and depression, mental health. That's every day, that's every single day. And unfortunately I see many couples breaking because it is hard, and families just saying I can't deal with this anymore, and it's not acceptable. It's you cannot deal with this in a normal way. It's so hard to be separated for someone you love, and you cannot get into the criteria for the travel exemption. Even, yes, people, family that are married and that can prove that they are married, they are in a real relationship, and they don't receive a travel exemption. It's so hard for everyone. And I see and I read many stories every single day, people sharing how hard is for everyone, and losing jobs and not making enough money to live in countries that maybe there's not even their country, right? I am in Cancun, Mexico right now, trying to get to Australia. My fiance is from New Zealand, but he's living in Australia right now. And we're trying desperately every single day. And I also see many times a lot of the people trying to have a travel exemption to leave Australia and to, yes, reunite with the family, the kids, the couples, just trying. And that is not happening. The people are stuck in Australia, they cannot leave, and the partners cannot enter into Australia. So we really hope this change, because it has been so long and it's so hard for everyone. And the government has to realize that this is unhuman and this has to end. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Louisa and Adam. Partners aren't the only one who have been separated by the Australian government and who have no clear pathway or reasonable and achievable process to follow. There are also children who have spent the pandemic abroad away from their parents. The processes DFAT have put in place are not working. It does not meet the needs of this community. Our next speakers will tell us more about the experience of being separated from your child during a pandemic as a result of Australia's border restrictions.
I'm working as a full-time registered nurse in Orange, New South Wales. My husband is a disability support worker. We are under 489 visa, and our daughter was stranded in India for the last 18 months, and after a very hard struggle, finally we got exemption and visa for my mother, and also she got exemption. So they are traveling from India to Australia yesterday. They didn't reach here yet. We'll land tonight. And I am a part of the WhatsApp group for the unaccompanied minors in India. So I came to know that many temporary residents like us, like 482, 485, 491, 489, and so many parents who are having student visa, bridging visa, also have their children stranded in India, and they are finding very much difficulty to get exemption, and their exemptions applications are rejecting always. So my request to the authority is, they are also here, they are with a valid visa, they are trying hard to develop our country's, Australian country's economy. So kindly help those parents to get the exemption, and please allow the kids to come back to Australia and to be with their parents. It's a human right matter. We cannot differentiate the sadness of a parents with the visa thing. Doesn't matter they are holding a temporary visa, permanent visa, or citizen, the pain is same. So psychological hurt is same for everyone. So please give the temporary residents a good hope. Kindly accept their exemption, and I'm believing that hopefully all Australians and all people in Australia will get the vaccination very soon, and the border is open for everyone. So I am once again pleading the government and all the respective authorities, kindly consider the pain of every people, every kid, and every population in Australia, irrespective of their visa status, and please allow their exemption. Kindly see every population is same and their psychological level is same, and please provide them exemption. Thank you so much.
I have two daughters who are currently stuck in India. It was for a very short period of time that I went back to India along with my daughters and my parents, who had a valid visa at that point of time. But I had to come back to Australia following some work commitments, and my girls would have soon followed back with my parents who had valid visa, as I say. But they couldn't do so because of the border closures, and since then they are stuck in India. It is so painful to see your kids on WhatsApp and video calls every day, and I request the government to take some initiatives to reunite our kids so that they can come back to Australia. I'm on a 485 visa, and I have filed for exemptions a few times, but each time I get a reply saying that my circumstances, my reasons are not compelling and compassionate enough, and a return of my kids, my family, would pose a significant threat to the Australian community, and my reasons are not compassionate enough. I request the government to the immigration department that the pain of being away from your child is definitely very compelling and compassionate. Please take some steps to reunite the stranded kids with their parents in Australia, irrespective of the visa subclass. This will be so helpful for people like us. Please do something about this. Please.
Hi everyone, my name is Pratik, and I want to bring you the journey about Australian stuck in India. So with Neha Sandhu, I formed this WhatsApp group and for unaccompanied minor parents, and we brought a lot of parents on this common platform. Many parents were not aware of that they need to register their child with the DFAT as a kind of unaccompanied minor, and every day, even these days as well, every now and then there is parents joining this group to get the information. So this sort of information should have been done by the work. This should have been done by Australian government, but they are not getting that sort of support. So this WhatsApp group is assisting them for that. parents are getting a case officer allocated, which is supposed to get their tickets organized, their visas, if they are accompanying, if they are traveling with grandparents, their visas organized, their exemptions organized. But still, there is bits and pieces information that's missing. So there is communication is not niche from the defect case officers. They are not communicating properly. They are not providing enough information to the parents, and parents are still serving, so they are still coming back to the group to get further information, which is not good. If you're serving someone, you should serve from end to end. That is what the purpose was for the case officer, but that is not happening. Northern Territory quarantine facility, they're not allowing parents to join their children who are quarantined there. Or like 3-year-old child, you are asking the 3-year-old child to stay with a stranger whom they don't know. I understand they traveled from Delhi to Darwin for 13 hours flight, but that doesn't create a bonding. For bonding, you need to stay with child, and they're not allowing parents to stay there, which is inhumane. DFAT is rejecting temporary residents, like they are taxpayers. PR citizen, temporary residents, anyone on a visa, they are here because the Australian government want them to be here. So then the government is not helping them. This is not right. We need support from the government for either that person is a temporary resident, or citizen, or visitor visa, or whatever. If the child is separated from the parents, it's on humanitarian grounds, they need to be separated. And that is what the message I want to bring it over here, that we need support, more support from Australian government to reunite the separated families. Thank you all. Thank you.
We both are living in Perth, Western Australia. We are on student visa, subclass 500, and currently I am working as a disability support worker team leader, which is in critical care sector. My 4-year-old son stuck in India since 2019. As we send him India to visit family member and spend some times with the family, and we had planned to bring him back April 2020, but unfortunately border was closed and he couldn't come back to Australia. And I had applied exemption 7 times for my son and for my mom to bring him back to Australia, but unfortunately it was rejected because of my visa status. So it's very painful and stressful situation when my son asking every day to us, when will you come to here to bring me with you, mom and dad, please come with me. And he also delay his academic progress, and he will celebrate his 5th birthday on 21st September without us. So it's very painful situation for us. So now I am facing many challenges to bring my son back to Australia. So many parents like us also facing many problems to bring their children back. So it's my humble request to the government, Australian government, please consider to kids and please approve their exemption so every children can reunite with their family. Please. Thank you.
I am on student visa at the moment. When we arrived here, my daughter was only 3 years and we were unsure that what kind of environment would be here, and she would be really happy to be exist with this environment, or would she adopt those environment, because here everything would be new for her. So we decided that after 2 or 3 months we will bring our daughter back here when we manage all and how we can let her exist in this kind of environment. But as we arrived here in the March 2020, after this everything was shut, border was closed, nobody can travel to and from, so there was a hope that I can bring my daughter back here. Every agent saying that this is not possible, so you have to wait when the border will open. Now it's almost 2 years almost 2 years, and my daughter is now 5 years. She celebrated her birthday without me, and I can see the pain and grief in her eyes, and she's sending me a voice message when she's saying that, when can I come here, mama? Like, these are really painful. When I saw any kid here, I saw my daughter, how she big, how she tall. Like, this is the time that parents should with their kids, and I can't like play with her, can talk with her, hug her. There are lots of things that parents do with their kids. They engage and they taught the environments, they teaching them lots of things. But I think that I missed the opportunity. Please, I beg that I really want my daughter here. There are lots of things that I can't explain. I really emotionally not well, because sometime I just cried when I saw her picture.
I live in Perth. I am a temporary visa holder, visa subclass 485. My both children have been stuck in India for more than the last 2 years. My parents told us to take the children to India for a while and then bring back soon, because my both kids born in Australia. So they said to meet my other family members, and we decided it's okay. But suddenly border closed because of the COVID-19 disease. So it's very hard to bring back. So, and also I am belong to unaccompanied minor parents WhatsApp group. There are many parents like me in this group whose children are stuck in India. I applied exemption many times, but they did not approve it because of my visa status is temporary residence. But they approved exemption for permanent residents or citizen parents' kids. But I am thinking all parents' feelings are the same for their kids. So why they are doing a discrimination? So we request to Australian government to please reunite all family. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Harsha. I am one of the group admins for the unaccompanied minors stuck in India, formed by Neha Sandhu. We have formed this group to unite the parents that are whose kids are stuck in India, and we understand that there have been so many kids that are currently in India at this moment, and we have managed to unite a lot of people. We have managed to bring a lot of people, parents, into this platform, and there are so many people who are still joining till today. And we also understand that there are so many other parents who are not even aware of this WhatsApp group that is currently helping out the parents. I'm here to speak about the current situation where the minors are stuck in India for more than 2 years. We understand there are so many kids who got reunited with their families in the recent past, and it has been identified that most of the kids are either citizens or permanent residents of this country. There's so many other kids whose parents are on temporary visas or students, and who are still in India. It is we understand that DFAT is assigning case officers, and they are handling the situation on a case-on-case basis. However, we feel that they are not able to provide enough support and guidance to the patient, to the parents, or the encouragement to the parents who are already in the distress by losing their loved ones and by leaving their loved ones in India. The case officers keep on rejecting the exemptions, even though the parents are applying for multiple times, which I think is not a good sign. Is not a good sign. Um, which is not a good sign at all. The government should be helping them instead of creating roadblocks to the parents who are already struggling to get their kids back. And about the quarantine facilities, I think it is better if we get the pressure on the government to increase or approve the exemptions for the parents to stay with the kids when the kids are traveling with someone else. It would make the kids feel safe, and at the same time it would also be helpful for the kids' mental health well-being, because they would definitely feel safe when they are with a parent for the 14 days of quarantine rather than someone who they don't even know. So it is always the responsibility of the government to unite the families, and every kid in this country deserves to feel safe and be happy with their families. Thank you.
My name is Neha Sandhu. I'm the admin of Australian Stuck in India Facebook group and working closely with the parents of unaccompanied minors since June 2020. We have a WhatsApp group for unaccompanied minor parents as well as a Facebook page, flythekidshome. This WhatsApp group is a platform of hope for the parents that our child will be the next one to return back. It took about a year for DFAT to figure out the plan for the unaccompanied minors. In past 3 months, many citizen and resident children were able to return back. But still, DFAT is lacking to serve justice for the parents, citizen and resident parents who have some unexceptional circumstances. For example, where they applied exemption for somebody who was outside the immediate family unit, the exemption got rejected multiple times. Some got exemption on the condition that parent cannot join the child at Darwin. The child has to quarantine with the guardian who is accompanying the child during flight. DFAT consular officer's role in some cases was just to collect the paperwork and submit it to the flight team. It is sad a 3-year-old girl has to quarantine with the mother's friend. Some of the parents unwillingly accepted this proposal as they were desperate for the return of their child. If the parents get proposal from the consular officer of getting exemption to go to India, bring back the child and then quarantine at Darwin, then what is the problem? If child was traveling back with the guardian, why not a parent from their own city can travel to Darwin to join the child in the quarantine? This shows the lack of coordination between DFAT and anti-health team. There is a biggest concern. There are significant number of children who are visa holder. These children are awaiting to return back to their parents. The trauma of separation for the visa holder parent is same as the citizen parent has. Their travel exemptions are rejected multiple times because of their visa subclass. And some of them got reply that they can leave the country to reunite with their child, which is not a fair treatment. I request to the authorities to reconsider the plea of these visa holder parents also. The other front where me and a dedicated team of volunteers who are working to support the returning traveler in Qantas flight WhatsApp groups. It's really sad to witness that the returned travelers were treated as numbers only. In many cases, the criteria of vulnerability is still lacking. Whosoever booked the flight in the first few minutes of the email were able to return back. I know many personal stories of the vulnerable people who had long wait. Some of them are still waiting and some chose to travel via extra expensive flights with long haul. The criteria of capping also seems to be failed when there is a large-scale community transmission, and the promise of dedicated quarantine facilities remained a promise only. I'm hoping the country to achieve the target of 80% vaccination soon so that the normal air travel be restored back. The struggle of 18 months of stranded people, only those people can understand who were stranded overseas or some of the family member was stranded overseas. Our fellow countrymen inside the country only judged them and outcasted them. I'm hoping for the good times soon.
So far, we've heard just some of the heartbreaking experiences of partners, parents, and their children separated by the current border closures. There is, however, another side to the border restrictions. That is, the challenges faced by people who live, work, and study in Australia on temporary visas. Many were outside Australia in March 2020 when the borders first closed, either for a short trip abroad or because they were due to arrive soon and start their lives in Australia. Temporary visa holders aren't currently permitted to enter Australia except under very limited circumstances. So for our next speakers, I'd like to introduce the group of skilled migrants who are 489 and 491 visa holders and who were originally approved by the Australian government to work and live in regional Australia based on the valuable skills that they bring to regions where they're lacking. Many of these people are supposed to become the next generation of permanent residents after fulfilling a period of living and working in regional Australia during their visa period. However, for 18 months, their lives are being put on hold.
Hi. We are a temporary resident who was stuck in India since last February 2020. We came here to get engaged, and because of the pandemic situation and the border closure, we were not able to go back. And we lost our home, car, all our essential items were there were in Australia. We came here with just 3 weeks of clothes.
And all our documents are there in Australia, everything, like we literally came with just one bag with the aim of staying in India just for a couple of weeks. And I don't think, just like us, so many 485 visa holders were not prepared for this long halt in their lives.
We just want the government, Australian government, just to listen to all the 485 people who are stuck in India, who are stuck anywhere in the world, just to extend or freeze our visas, not to open them. Also expected given time frame for the temporary visa that we had, which was not given to us because of the pandemic situation. We just hope that we...
And just like us, all the 485 visa holders come to overseas or any other country for that matter just to gain that experience after studies, and that experience have been snatched from us, and we only suffering? Why are 485 visa holders are not taken into consideration? We really want the government to help us out, think about us, feel what we have been going through, and just one step to just freeze or hold the visas can change so many lives, can give that peace in our minds and everything. It can just literally change so many people's lives. Because as the day passes, we are losing hope. We are just, breaking from inside that with the uncertainty that is happening. So please,
We kindly request the Australian government to freeze or extend 485 visa all over the world, not just India or not just us. So we hope to get good news soon and to get back our lives which we had in Australia. Thank you.
I was doing my job, I was working here and quite well settled. But I resigned, left my job, sold my car, sold my household items, everything, and decided to move to Australia. It was February, March 2020, before the lockdown began. This COVID situation has brought a lot of mental depression, financial losses to me and my family. I'm more worried about my daughter who before moving to Australia, when I received my visa grant, I asked her to do the research and study about the Australian system and their locations in Adelaide where you want to live and where you want to study. So she had already listed a lot of schools where she wants to study, and now she's asking me when is the time when she will be there to study. Waited for 9 months us that the border will open and then we will travel. But when I saw that it's not happening, I had to admit my kids to school because they were suffering from a lot of pressure, depression for not going to school. After I admit them in the school, there was no job for me in Pakistan as well. So I'm kind of a bit of in a limbo between Dubai, Pakistan and Australia. So I'm still hopeful. I'm still hoping that we might be able to reach in time and so that she can continue her studies. But without job, with young kids, school-going kids, is a great mental and physical and emotional and financial pressure which we are facing right now. And I hope that the government should allow us to come back, all the stranded skilled migrants who can add great value to the economy of regional economies. I received a skilled migration visa of corporate services manager, which was required, which was in great demand at that time. Since then, the companies are hiring more health workers, and these health workers, all these organizations, they require a corporate service manager to manage. Every day I see, I'm subscribed to all the job portals there, and I see there are still huge demand of corporate service manager, which can be fulfilled if the right manpower is there. I worked most of my life in a cosmopolitan city like Dubai, and I have a global experience of corporate services. I can add great value to the regional economy of South Australia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Riyad, and I'm one of the group admins and representatives of the skilled stranded migrants of regional Australia. And I would just like to emphasize that as skilled migrants who have been granted this visa, we are very aware and thankful to the Australian government to have been granted this privilege of moving to Australia and be able to contribute to the regional economy. I think most of us remember the joy we had the day we had this visa granted. A lot of us have been waiting for years to be able to accomplish this dream and be part of it. And one thing also that is important to mention is that we have basically ticked all the boxes. We have been invited by the Australian government to move to these specific areas based on our valuable skills acquired in our specific fields. We have nurses, we have people who are very experienced in the medical field who would like to help also the Australian hospitals, some of which are currently in need of medical staff. We have architects, we have engineers. So we're over 8,400 people who are currently on 489 and 491 visas. And these visas are, like many other visas, very limited in time. We have visas that last 4 years, others that last 5 years, and we are required within this time period to have lived and worked in our designated regional areas in order to be able to apply and become the next generation of permanent residents. So we are very grateful for this. However, like many of these groups present here, we are in a limbo situation, and this has caused a lot of frustration since border closure because, as you've seen from Naveed's video, a lot of people have quit their jobs, have even moved to their home countries to start packing and move to Australia only to find out they couldn't fly there. Some people were lucky enough to activate their visa to go there on the first time. They have started their lives, had jobs, even started their own businesses, only went to visit their families and suddenly got stuck offshore. Then we also have groups of people who haven't even had the chance to move to Australia yet and have already lost 18 months of their visa. So on top of the COVID situation, the mental pressure, the financial pressure as well, because we have members even in South Africa and other parts of the world who have sold their houses and all their belongings, their cars to move to Australia and are just waiting with their kids, asking them, when can I start school? We're just asking to have clarity. And our ask is really to the Australian government to secure our path to PR once it is safe to do so for us to enter Australia. All we're asking is a fair go based on the nomination that we've received to move to Australia, to live there, and even more now to contribute to Australia's economic recovery in the regional areas. So our only ask is to either extend our visas by the time we lost, as this we believe is a fair go for everyone to fulfill their permanent residence requirements, or at least once we're allowed back to count the period lost offshore as permanent, as residents in Australia. Because this was no fault of our own. All the efforts we have put so far with the media, with Home Affairs, was really to just seek clarity in order not to be in this limbo situation anymore. And we really look forward to move to Australia and help as soon as possible with the economic recovery, especially in the regional areas, because we see so many jobs listed and so many employers in different regions who are really looking for our skills, want to hire us. However, we are stuck here. So we urgently ask the government to please give us a fair go and grant us our chance to fulfill our PR and start our new lives in our regional areas and contribute with our valuable skills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Riyadh. We've now heard from speakers about their struggles to obtain exemptions to enter Australia, including the challenges and the lack of information and bureaucracy they encounter and the heartbreak they endure while they wait. Our next group of speakers are those who do not even have this option. As counterintuitive as it may sound, parents are not currently recognised as immediate family. This is heartbreaking for so many families, in particular those who are not anticipating to need to give birth or raise children without any familiar support. It is heartbreaking for the parents who are missing the lives of their children and missing watching their grandchildren grow. These moments don't come back, and they're not the same when they're shared through a screen.
Good morning. My name is Valeria Greenfield, Australian citizen and Queensland resident. I am one of the admins of the Facebook group called Parents Are Immediate Family, which represents 25,000 members, all Australian citizens and permanent residents whose parents were born overseas. While Australia has welcomed hundreds of thousands of non-Australian citizens and residents for the last 18 months since the start of the pandemic, our parents have been denied entry. And why? Because they are not considered immediate family, and also because they are not part of the long list of exemption applications. This information can be found on the Australian Bureau of Statistics and also in the immigration website. It is why we have presented petition after petition. So we ask the government to let our parents into the country, but these all have been denied. And why? because of two reasons. One, because the government needs to keep Australians safe. And the other reason, because there are too many of our parents. And I ask the government, aren't we Australians? Our safety doesn't count. It's only COVID what it matters. You tell us that you need to keep Australians safe. And let me tell you one thing. I've lived in Queensland with many few cases in the world, and I've never felt that unsafe in my life, never. The fear, the worry, the anguish that my parents can die at any point and I'm not allowed to see them and they are not allowed to come here has been really hard to manage. And I'm only one of millions going through this pain and concerns. The other reason, because there are too many. But why can the government implement some solutions? You want the celebrities to come here and film movies. You make up a plan, you work something out. You want the sports to happen here in Australia. You work something out again. You make this happen. What about our parents? Aren't they important? Our Facebook group, day after day, have several hundreds of people going through extremely hard situations, high-risk pregnancies. They need support with mental health illness, with physical illness. They are desperately to reunite with their parents. And we have no solution in sight. We have no answers. And not only because of these reasons, also because they are our parents. They are the grandparents of our children. We don't only want to see them when they are about to die. We want to see them when they are alive, when we are good. We request and we demand the government for a solution, for a plan. It's been 18 months since the start of the pandemic, and we are doing exactly the same or even worse than day one in March 20 when the borders were closed. Our parents are not celebrities. Our parents are not sport people, but they give us life and they're important. There is no love like our parents, and there's no love like our grandparents. We want to know when and why. It's been too long.
My name is Alexandra Parker, and I am the founder of We Need Our Village. I have been passionately advocating for all expecting and new parents whose mental health has been affected by the pandemic. I'm originally from the UK, a beautiful seaside town called Bournemouth, and I've lived in Sydney for 9 years. I have 2 young children, Lily and Jack. I gave birth to my second child, Jack, in May 2020 as COVID started to infiltrate the world. Like many pandemic mothers, my experience has been tinged with despair, isolation and heartbreak. A strict Australian border closure prevented my mum from being able to travel from the UK to support me. Having a baby during the pandemic has been the hardest thing I have ever done. The sense of despair I have felt has been so acute at times it's hard to process. After a traumatic birth and being extremely sleep deprived, I could barely function as a human. How could I be a mother when it felt like I was living in a vacuum? My body was overtaken with grief and I went to a very dark place. My breaking point was when my 4-year-old daughter had to pick me up off the floor. I knew I had to get help, and I was diagnosed with postnatal depression and anxiety. If my mother was allowed to travel from the UK to Australia to support my children and I through this time, my perinatal mental health would not have declined as much as it did. Women who have given birth during the crisis have been some of the most affected in our communities. The border closures have denied expecting and new parents of their vital support system, leaving them isolated and vulnerable. Isolation can have a significant effect on exasperating perinatal mental ill health and places a larger number of people at a heightened risk of postnatal depression. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. I want to do everything I can to help educate people on how important it is to look after the mental health of expecting and new parents. Research has shown the presence of a strong support system can help mitigate the risk and trauma perinatal mental illness may cause. Perinatal mental health services are being inundated with people needing support. There are now long wait lists to get help. Perinatal mental illness has been identified as a major public health concern and can have long-lasting detrimental effects on families and children. We need to find a way to address this problem now. Prime Minister, Minister Andrews, you must allow compassionate travel exemptions for a support person, like a grandparent, to travel to Australia in order to provide the vital support during the birth of a child. Childbirth is a life transitioning event. People cannot and should not go through this transition vulnerable and alone. No new parent or child should be at a heightened risk of this crippling mental health condition. To all the expecting and new parents, we need to stand with each other in support. Share our truth and experiences. It is our power. Our collective voices can make a difference so we can be heard loud and clear. Perinatal mental health matters.
Hello, my name is Daniela and I am the one who is behind the video and the song Is This Australia? And for the last few months I've spent a lot of time raising awareness for the mental health impacts and the emotional effects that the current border closure policies have on many Australian citizens and residents that are locked in, locked out or locked down, and for personal reasons, especially the mental health impacts it has on expecting and young mothers like myself. In preparation for today's vigil in London and on the world or in the World Wide Web, I've just watched Alexandra Parker's video and it has really hit me. I hardly ever allow myself anymore to think about it too much. It's like I'm pushing it away because it's too painful to really, really dwell on it. But I cannot even express in words how incredibly sad I am that I, and especially my children, have been denied the opportunity to have my mum and their grandmother here for our support. And I can really only hope that things will change soon and that my mum will have the pleasure of meeting this little one. Yeah, I guess that is just something I wanted to share.
Okay, this is me, Daniela, again, a couple of hours after I took this very spontaneous and very raw video. So here's part 2 with hair and makeup adjusted and my thoughts collected. On behalf of everyone who has been separated from loved ones and immediate family during these past 1.5 years due to the border closures and flight caps, I would like to say our patience, understanding, and mental and emotional capacity are stretched to the limit. We understand that Australians need to be kept safe. What we don't understand is how are parents not considered immediate family? How much more immediate does it get? How are we supposed to feel when our applications to be with our parents and loved ones are rejected because our reasons are declared not compelling enough and that the risk does not outweigh the benefit to Australian society? How are we supposed to feel when we are told to watch loved ones being sick, sad, die, born, growing up on a screen, when at the same time politicians, celebrities, business people, rich people and sports stars, plus their families, wives and girlfriends can come and go? Oh yes, I forgot, they have important and compelling business. They provide value. Well, too bad my mum doesn't play cricket. Well, I propose that we and our mental health have incredible value too. We are actually holding this country, this society together, but we are torn apart and we are falling apart. Please set the priorities straight, end the double standards, and let us be with our families.
Thank you, Valeria, Alexandra, and Daniela. Our final group of speakers today are Australian citizens and permanent residents who are or who have been stranded overseas. This group of people do have the right to enter Australia. They're on the last stage of the journey that the other groups are still working towards, yet they're still experiencing incredible levels of stress and financial burden. Many have been locked outside the borders, away from their homes, family, and friends for 18 months or longer. Those who have been lucky to return have done so at considerable emotional and financial cost and have been greeted by a stressful 2-week stay in unsuitable quarantine facilities. There are also those who have chosen to live outside Australia who have since lost the ability to visit. While everyone is aware that there are sacrifices to be made during a pandemic, there are some phone calls you just can't ignore. Australians who live overseas have lost loved ones, have lost the chance to say goodbye, have missed births and marriages, and have been unable to support their family members through illness and death, and have been unable to be supported themselves. Our final group of speakers will tell us more about this experience and how the Morrison's government's policies are creating this situation.
Hi there, I'm Victoria Keating, co-owner and director of X Travel, a travel agency that has spent the past 18 months repatriating more than 1,000 people home, mostly from South America, but also from other parts of the globe, to be reunited with friends and family. If you haven't needed to travel within the past 18 months, you may not understand the complexities of travelling in a COVID environment, and the concept might be quite foreign to you. In 2020, as COVID cases began being reported around the globe, we began to close our borders to individual countries. First China, then Italy, then Israel, and then a blanket policy was issued, closing our border to every other country. With borders closed, no one was able to fly, which means that planes could not feasibly operate with so many empty seats. And air traffic around the globe stopped. To give you an idea of what this looks like, in September 2019, 1.365 million international passengers travelled through Sydney Airport. A year later, in September 2020, that number was drastically reduced to 3,000 400 international passengers. And now, a year later, when things should be easier and travel should be freer, that number is forecast at 3,000 international passengers in September 2021. These recent passenger numbers reflect what's been happening in Australia for over a year. Although there are plenty of airlines desperate to fly, extreme restrictions on passenger numbers mean that it's not financially viable to do so. It costs the same amount of money to fly a plane with 25 passengers as it does with 250. And because airlines need to recoup their costs, we start to see flight prices inflate. Right now, the average cost of flying to Australia from the area I've mostly been looking after, South America, is anywhere between $18,000 to $25,000. If you manage to get home for less than $4,000, you could say you got a bargain. If you're a family of 4, though, still trying to get home, you're looking at paying in excess of $100,000, and that's before you get to the cost of your quarantine. It's not just lack of seats and prices, though, that make it difficult for people to get home. Over the past 18 months, we have seen constant border closures, changing COVID test requirements, visa suspensions globally, people having fear of contracting the virus if they travel, and constant flight cancellations. For those who are lucky enough to get a ticket, you're even more lucky if you get to fly without cancellations. People I've spoken to have had 12 different flights cancel. Sometimes the airline will refund you, sometimes they will keep your money in credit. Most times they will try and rebook you. Right now, if you're cancelled on any of the recent airline cancellations into Australia, major carriers are advising that they will be unlikely to get you home before January or February 2022 if current restrictions remain in place. Once you do manage to secure a seat, you can then start the process of packing up your life, selling your possessions, quitting your job, disconnecting your power, handing in your keys, and saying goodbye to friends and family. So what then do you do if you turn up at the airport with all of your worldly possessions in a bag or on your back, to be told when you go to check in that you've been bumped or that your flight has been cancelled altogether and you can't fly for another 4 or 5 months? Where do you go? What do you do? This is a very real situation being experienced by thousands of people each week trying to get home. And what makes it worse is that not everybody understands this. We're told, you've had plenty of time to get home already. There are flights landing every day with lots of empty seats. You're not actually welcome to come home with the virus. And a myriad of other rather uninformed suggestions. To those of you who hear this, I say hang in there. You're doing really well, doing the best that you can. And to those of you who say these things, I say be kind. These people are doing their best to get home. They don't want to bring the virus. They just want to hug their family, walk along the beach they grew up on, see friends they went to school with, and reconnect with their roots. The emotional toll this virus is having on travellers is horrific, and there is no real sign of clarity yet. While there is the suggestion that high vaccination rates will be crucial to borders reopening, it won't be an opening of the floodgates. And for many, there is still no clarity on when they will be able to get home. Different states have different policies, and depending on where you are coming from, you may be just okay to walk on through, or you may still find that you need to spend 2 weeks in quarantine when you arrive, which will restrict arrival numbers so long as there is restriction on how many hotel beds exist. What needs to happen is better communication. Those who are stuck abroad and trying to get home might be able to get by if they know when they will be able to return. But a constant changing of policies and targets, waves of flight cancellations, backlash and vitriol from home, and uncertainty about the future is akin to a form of torture, and humans are not built for that sort of ambiguity. Clearer paths, details of which vaccines will be accepted, details of which countries will be red, amber or green, and some more clarity on what those colours mean for returning travellers will save a lot of further stress and heartache on people who are already quite heartbroken and really just want to get home. Hang in there. Thank you.
Hello, I am Matilda and I am stuck in Madrid, Spain. After trying to renew my visa in Spain, I was told that the Australian authorities will not allow people to renew their visas from Spain. So I needed to return to Australia to renew my visa to stay here. After 4 cancelled flights back to Australia, I realised that there was pretty much no chance of me getting home. So I've spent the last 3 months researching ways of trying to stay in Spain legally, and it's resulted in me paying thousands of dollars for a lawyer to speak to Spanish immigration for me and try to work something out for me. After looking into this more and more, I've spoken to near on 100 people who have had the same issues, country jumping from country to country to try and stay legally, just to try and stay legal. I've seen people applying for all sorts of visas. I've seen people staying illegally in countries where the consequences aren't as strict as maybe some other countries, and it's heartbreaking. And the common theme for me and for so many Aussies that I've spoken to is that we can't afford it. We can't afford to be country jumping every month to make sure that we're not illegal in a country, and we can't afford to be locked out of our country. We can't afford the $20,000 it takes to get a business class seat into Australia. It's not sustainable. Something needs to change. Personally, I believe the biggest help the government could do right now is make the caps bigger for starters, or offer financial / visa support for Australians who are struggling overseas, with some sort of program or deal with other countries which makes it easier for Australians overseas. It may be a little bit easier for people who are dealing with legal consequences of staying illegally, or some financial support so Aussies don't have to sell their car, sell their house, sell everything just to country jump to try and get back to Australia. Something needs to change.
I'm one of the lucky ones that have made it back to Australia recently, but it was not easy. My wife and I were travelling from Taiwan to Australia, and we had 1 flight cancelled on us. In the end, it probably cost us about $10,000 to return to Australia, and the process is unbearably painful. I think the hardest part is not knowing whether you're going to fly or not. The DFAT situation, the air flight situation, the caps, it means that no one knows if their flight's going to go ahead. And for us, we packed up our life, we shipped our things, we quit our jobs, we ended the lease on the house that we were renting, but yet at any time our flight could have been cancelled, which would have left us in complete and utter disarray, basically. So that, I think, is the most difficult thing that people are dealing with at the moment. Every single morning I would wake up and check the Facebook groups for other people that are going through a similar situation, and again and again and again there was a tormenting story about how flights have been cancelled, and the stress and anxiety that that causes is completely unnecessary and unbearably painful. But like I said, we were one of the lucky ones, and we did get on a flight and came back to Australia at the end of July 2021. The quarantine process was very difficult for us, and I think that's the biggest problem, is that it's not the same for everyone. Whereas one person might get a 2-bedroom suite with a fully equipped kitchen, balcony, windows, the other person, which was in our case, will get a tiny shoebox of a room, a window that doesn't open, no access to fresh air, and you're sharing filtered air or air-conditioned air through the air vents, and you're sharing that air with everyone else in the quarantine facility, which doesn't make it a quarantine facility at all. The fear, the frustration, the fact that no one is really there to help you and no one can do anything about it is ridiculous. 18 months into a pandemic, we don't have quarantine facilities. All of your freedoms are stripped away from you. The food is, in our case, was terrible, and you have no freedom to even say no to the food. You're forced to take the food that they give you, and you're forced to pay an unreasonable amount for it. So I guess what I'm saying is I am so grateful to be back, but that's bundled with a hell of a lot of guilt, because I know that there are other people, fellow Australians, that are stuck overseas and that should be here with us. And it's bundled with a lot of frustration because we're so far behind in Australia in dealing with this pandemic and looking after our people, and I hope this changes.
But I would hope that those who are looking to come home, that we'd be able to do that within months, and I would hope that we can get as many people home, and if not all of them, by Christmas.
Did he mean Christmas 2021 or Christmas 2022?
I understand it was Christmas 2020, but I also believe you may be facetious in asking that.
I'm serious. It seems unlikely, given the announcement on Friday, that we're going to have people, the 29,100 stranded Australians, home by Christmas.
I'll be home for Christmas.
Hi, my name's Jo Gwynn, and I help run two groups on Facebook, Australians Stuck in India and Australians Stuck Around the World. And at the start of the pandemic, I was also stuck in India, which is how I got involved in the Facebook groups, the place that we turned to for support when the borders closed and we didn't know what to do. Today, we're grieving 18 months of border closures. And for me personally, it's 18 months since I was meant to marry my partner. I'm one of the lucky ones. I was able to return on the second Qantas flight back to Australia. But when I left, I never anticipated that we would be in the position that we're still in now. I didn't, in my wildest dreams, think that it would take me so long to reunite with my partner, 16 months now and counting. I didn't expect that I would be on my 275th day of lockdown, curfew, quarantine and isolation. And I most certainly didn't expect that there would be over 40,000 Australians registered with DFAT still trying to come home, and hundreds of thousands more that aren't counted that are affected by these border closures. When the travel restrictions were introduced, none of us anticipated the situation that we're facing right now. And the fact is that 18 months after the border restrictions started, at a time when many countries are moving away from restrictions altogether, and it's harder than ever to get into Australia, harder than ever. We're 18 months into border restrictions now, and at this stage, just over 2,000 passengers per week are allowed to enter Australia on commercial flights. Some flights have just 7 passengers on board. And I cannot tell you how heartbreaking it is to see photographs of empty planes flying into Australia when there are so many thousands of people who need to get back home. People just cannot find flights to book. And even if they do, even if they're lucky to find one at costs of $14,000, $20,000, that isn't a guarantee that you are going to get home. Even paying that much, people get bumped, and people get repeatedly bumped, and their flights are repeatedly cancelled. And there's no guarantee of getting a refund or getting a timely refund. The uncertainty around Australia's borders reopening is leading airlines to consider withdrawing their flights from Australia entirely. We're 18 months into the pandemic, and Australian citizens and permanent residents are still bottlenecked by hotel quarantine. There's still no purpose-built quarantine facility. There's still no proper plans for home quarantine, let alone moving beyond that. And there's very little hope for all the visa holders that are stuck outside of Australia. We're 18 months into travel restrictions and nothing has been done to ease them. 18 months and we're only just starting to build those quarantine facilities. And there's plans to run repatriation flights well into next year. 18 months and still no clear answer as to when the pain, the suffering that travel restrictions have caused is going to end. 18 months ago when the borders closed, no one expected that they'd still be stuck and separated from their loved ones. No one expected the government to abandon its citizens. No one expected that the government would prevent them from coming home for such a long time and neglect them. No one expected to be vilified by their country, by the Prime Minister, by their family and friends. No one expected that it would have actually been made illegal to try and come back to Australia, which is what happened to people stuck in India earlier this year. No one expected that we would have our human rights denied, our right to come home, children's rights to be with their parents. Stranded Australian citizens, permanent residents, visa holders and their families have been the victims of Australia's COVID response. No other country has prevented their people from returning home, and Australians can't even get support and information that they need from the embassies and the high commissions, from DFAT and from the government. So people turn to online communities for support and for information, and not just basic information like, can I transit through New Zealand or not? People come for emotional support. They ask, how can I get my child back? They ask, how can I get my dying mother home? They ask, how can we cut through this red tape and bureaucracy that is actively preventing the most vulnerable of all from reuniting with their families? And this help that people get is coming from the generosity of friendly strangers, not from the government, not from DFAT, not from our embassies. Every day I see trauma, I see mental health crises, I see flights cancelled, jobs and homes lost. I see marriages failing and families living with complete uncertainty. I see people who have given up hope of ever returning home. And sadly, I hear stories of people who aren't going to make it home. They haven't made it home. We've had 18 months of heartache, depression, stress, pain, suffering, and uncertainty. And it's time for healing. It's time to reconnect Australia.
Hi, I'm Deb Tallis and I'm the spokesperson for Free and Open Australia. I am also a moderator on the Australians Stuck Around the World. I was stuck for 10 months in India trying to get out of India, which is still near impossible, and get back home to Australia. I have been home now since March of this year, and I can tell you that it is a really difficult time to come back here and still feel so much anxiety. The stress and the anxiety and the living in limbo, all of these things, financial difficulties, everything that has been happening to all of us around the world who can't get back to Australia It's not going to just be a quick fix for us. Like, we are suffering, we have suffered for a long time. Our efforts with the UN through Jeffrey Robinson QC basically fell on deaf ears to the Australian government. They feel that they have done nothing wrong. We know how bad it is. We are victims of their drive for COVID zero, reducing flights into the country and crippling all our hope of ever getting home. We don't ever want this to happen again, okay? And our efforts with the UN are hopefully going to come to a point where we can ask the Australian government that they make sure this never happens again through some type of policy. We're talking behind the scenes, we're working behind the scenes, and yeah, please get behind us and help us. If you're still stranded, fingers crossed that things change and you get home and can go straight to your house and quarantine at home. There are so many things that have gone wrong for so many people, and my heart goes out to everyone who is still stranded. And I'm just overwhelmed and appalled that I'm still speaking on behalf of stranded Australians after so long. March 2020 has passed long ago. Countries are open, people are living freely, and Australia still won't let their citizens home. Unforgivable. We will wear the scars of this for a long time. Thank you.
So that concludes the messages received from a variety of groups affected by Australia's border closures. But before we go, I'd like to thank the speakers who've joined us here today. I'd like to thank them for their time, for their passion, and for their courage. It wasn't easy finding speakers for this event. There are many people who are scared to speak publicly in case it impacts their ability to get on a DFAT repatriation flight, or who are scared because it may affect their visa processing at Home Affairs. And then there are those who are worried about the vitriol they expect to have directed their way by the media and public in Australia. Let's think about that for a minute. Australians and others who are affected by the border closures are scared to speak out about the suffering that they are enduring due to backlash by government departments and their fellow citizens. Compassion and empathy are desperately needed in this debate. Australians and Australian politicians need to recognise that there are people who are making extraordinary sacrifices through no choice of their own. There's nothing inherently dangerous about getting on a plane right now. Flight crews working on planes and passing in and out of Australia every day do it. Airports and airlines have developed safety protocols around testing before boarding and in flight safety, and data shows the risk of transmission during air travel is low. Not facilitating people to travel is a choice. The problems we've heard today are problems that can be solved by seeking to understand the needs of people who are separated and stranded and making a choice to develop policy and protocols that work for them. Protocols that get them safely on and off of those planes and home to their loved ones. This requires an open channel of communication with airlines and stranded travellers about reopening milestones to allow clarity, certainty, and forward planning. We need details about home quarantine logistics to be provided, including the delivery of a sustainable long-term plan in changing case numbers. The government must ensure a fair system that will allow equal opportunity for everyone affected by the border closures to reconnect once again, eliminating these elitist bidding wars that are currently in place for flights to get home. And finally, the government needs to outline real, effective guidelines that will reconnect Australia in time for Christmas 2021. Shortly, we'll be checking in on the Vigil on the ground in London and sharing some footage. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified when that goes live. Thank you for everyone that joined us here today. We appreciate your time and commitment, and especially those who are working to assist those stranded and separated, and for those interested in learning more about this situation. Together, we can reconnect Australia.
I think I hear the sounds of them and people talking. The months have passed without much movement. Our voices sound distorted on speakerphone. No certain texture, no certain smell. I lie in dread of a familiar tale, a prison island, a golden cage. We're left alone in silent heartache. No certain texture, no certain smell. Bring home the desperate souls. Bring home the ones we love. In different time zones we sit, and the uncertainty we breathe. We watch our loved ones free.